The Craigslist ad that popped up immediately caught my attention. House sitter needed in secluded Victorian mansion for 1 week. The payment was $1,000. It felt too good to be true, but my bank account was looking bleaker than usual, so I responded. The email exchange with Mr. Daniels was brief and cryptic. He was on a week-long trip and needed someone he could trust to look after his house. The location was remote and the internet was sketchy. The following day I made my way to the location provided. The drive was about 30 minutes of winding roads swallowed by dense forest. The house materialized like a forgotten dream in the distance against the dying sun, its windows dark and vacant. Using the key under the welcoming mat, I unlocked the creaking oak door and stepped inside. The place was opulent. High ceilings, grand staircases, and portraits of stern-faced ancestors frowning from the walls. An antique grandfather clock ticked relentlessly in the hall, its rhythmic heartbeat a constant reminder of my isolation. I picked a room and placed my suitcase next to the bed. I walked back to the living room and turned on the TV. I cozied up on the couch and decided I would do some exploring the following day. Day 2 arrived, bringing a shaft of sunlight that revealed a room I hadn't noticed before. Curiosity tugged, and I cautiously pushed open the creaking door. The room was dusty and empty, containing only a few items. A rocking chair sat in the corner of the room, but it wasn't empty. A grotesque dummy, stitched together from mismatched fabric scraps, sat staring back at me with large glass eyes. Its stitched grin mocked me, its long, bony fingers limply resting on the armrests. A scream died in my throat, replaced by a cold sweat. Who would make such a thing? It was truly hideous. Upon closer inspection, I noticed it was made out of a leather-like material and had several stitches holding it together. I looked around at the rest of the room. Next to the dummy, I noticed a trunk. Curiosity kicked in yet again, causing me to open it. Inside, random items were strewn all over. My eyes caught a collection of yellowed newspaper clippings lying beneath moth-eaten shawls. The headline screamed, "Local woman, Beth Jones, disappears." There were about 10 newspaper clippings of the same article, which was extremely strange. Why would Mr. Daniels keep this stored in a trunk? The missing woman, Beth Jones, had vanished without a trace. No leads or no clues, except one chilling detail. A witness saw a man matching Charles Daniels leaving the area on the night of her disappearance. Was it the same Mr. Daniels from this house? According to the article, Mr. Daniels was questioned by the police, but no evidence was found that he had anything to do with her disappearance. The case remained unsolved, a cold file gathering dust. Feeling freaked out, I placed the clippings neatly on top of each other and put them back in the trunk. While closing it, my eye caught the glimmer of a piece of plastic. I pushed the trunk lid back open and reached for the plastic card. It appeared to be a driver's license. My heart sank to my stomach when I saw the name on the card. Beth Jones. A young woman with blonde hair and dark eyes in her early 30s stared back at me. The air grew thick with a clammy dread. What was Mr. Daniels doing with the missing woman's driver's license? Was I staying in the home of a madman? My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. I closed the lid of the trunk and shut the door behind me. Needless to say, I was unable to sleep that night. The next morning I went to the police station armed with the newspaper clippings and the driver's license card. The officer listened intently, his brow furrowing. Finally, he looked at me, a flicker of interest in his eyes. "Interesting," he said, his voice low. "I am aware of this cold case from a few years ago. We will issue a warrant and search the house. Perhaps there's something we missed all those years ago." I nodded, got up and left the police station with a knot in the pit of my stomach. I didn't return to that house. I couldn't imagine being in the presence of Mr. Daniels when he came back home from his trip. A few days later, however, I received an email from him asking me why I wasn't at the house when he returned. I closed the email without responding, hoping that I wouldn't hear from him again. About a week later, I received a phone call. It was the same officer, his voice tinged with urgency. "We found something." He met me at the police station, a grim expression on his face. There was a hidden compartment in the trunk. We found strands of hair and clothing with traces of blood. We also found fabric scraps, needles, and thread. All matched the materials believed to be used to make the dummy on the chair. I frowned and looked at him questioningly. He took a deep breath. DNA analysis confirmed it. The dummy was made using human skin. Beth Jones' skin. The revelation crashed over me, a wave of revulsion and horror. Mr. Daniels had not just killed her, he'd twisted her very form into a grotesque mockery of life. The officer continued. We are currently searching the property again, this time with shovels. The news spread like wildfire. Mr. Daniels was apprehended and taken to prison. The small town buzzed with morbid curiosity. The excavation was slow and meticulous, but finally, they found it. A shallow grave containing skeletal remains. Dental records confirmed it was Beth. His trial went faster than anyone could have predicted due to the overwhelming evidence. The hidden compartment, Beth's remains, and even my testimony about the chilling presence in the house. Mr. Daniels, once a pillar of the community, was exposed for the monster he truly was. He never denied any of the allegations made against him, nor did he reveal why he did it. Justice, though delayed, had finally been served. Her chilling memorabilia was dismantled and destroyed. The house, once a monument to darkness, stood empty and ostracized. It would be torn down, its secrets buried with its foundation. I haven't responded to any ads on Craigslist, and I don't believe I ever will again. I hope Beth and her family can now rest in peace. Hey guys. Please consider subscribing if you want more videos from us here at Frightfest Factory. Let's get back into it. The flickering fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting the warehouse in an unsettling light. It wasn't exactly the security job I'd envisioned, but Craigslist never guarantees glamour. This one, though, did promise decent pay and minimal effort. Night security guard needed. Must be reliable. Light duties expected. Light duties, it turned out, meant guarding a single room of a warehouse in the back alleys of a deserted, yet dangerous, part of town. The room from the outside was unremarkable. Beige walls and a single locked door. My instructions were simple. Every other night at 2 a.m., a young man named Ethan would arrive with a brown bag. He would unlock the door, spend a couple of hours inside, and then leave. During that time, I was to take a rest break. My official job was to make sure no one entered the room besides Ethan. The first few nights were uneventful. The silence was broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling and the distant hum of traffic from the nearby highway. But then the sound started. Muffled thumps, like someone struggling, came from within the room during Ethan's visits. Curiosity gnawed at me, but Ethan's stern demeanor and the hefty sum in my paycheck kept me firmly in my chair. Family business, he'd explained with a tight smile when I'd asked about the sounds. Nothing for you to worry about. Weeks turned into months. The thumps became more frequent, interspersed with muffled shouts and what sounded suspiciously like whimpers. Each time, the urge to check the room intensified, but a healthy dose of self-preservation and the promise of a raise if I kept quiet held me back. Then, on a particularly humid night in late July, the routine shattered. A blood-curdling scream ripped through the silence, echoing down the alleyway. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Ignoring Ethan's instructions for the first time, I lunged for the room. The heavy oak door swung open with surprising ease. The room was dark. Only a sliver of moonlight sliced through a grimy window, casting grotesque shadows across the floor. In the center of the room, a large wooden chest sat, ornately carved and imposing. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and other unpleasantly bad smells. My stomach lurched. Tentatively, I switched on the overhead light. The harsh glare revealed Ethan kneeling beside the chest, his face pale and contorted in a mask of terror. The source of the scream, however, wasn't him. It was from inside the chest. A weak, raspy cry for help. With trembling hands, I approached the chest. Ethan scrambled to his feet, blocking my path. "What are you doing in here?" "Get out," he shrieked, his voice bordering on hysterical. My gaze flicked from his panicked face to the blood staining the floor near the chest. A horrifying possibility began to dawn on me. "Get out of my way," I growled, pushing him aside. The stench hit me first, a sickly putrefaction that made my eyes water. With a deep breath, I wrestled the heavy lid open. A frail figure lay huddled inside, emaciated and gasping for air. He had dried blood on the side of his head that knotted his hair together. His sunken eyes, wide with fear, locked with mine. "Ethan," he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. Recognition flickered in his son's face before a mask of fury descended. Ethan lunged towards me, but I instinctively pushed him back, the stench of decay rolling over us. "Help me," the man in the chest pleaded, his voice fading. Ethan picked up a loose pipe lying next to him and lunged at me again. The fight was a blur of adrenaline and fear. He swung at me with intense force, but I was able to dodge it in time. I pushed Ethan back and he fell on the floor. He got up again, but tripped over the open chest, the pipe clattering harmlessly to the floor. I pinned him down, my knee pressing into his back. "Stay down," I yelled at him. With one hand, I managed to get my phone out of my pocket and call the police. As the sirens wailed in the distance, the frail figure in the chest stirred. His eyes, barely open, met mine. A flicker of gratitude passed between us. The investigation revealed a meticulously crafted web of lies. Ethan had convinced the authorities, through forged documents and fabricated evidence, that his father had vanished years ago. This allowed him to inherit the old man's substantial fortune and sprawling estate. He hired me to make sure nobody entered the room while he waited for his father to die. It now makes my blood run cold to think that my other purpose was also to keep his father inside. He would bring just enough scraps of food in the brown bag to keep his father alive, which was beyond inhumane. The trial was a media frenzy. The son who'd imprisoned his father in a makeshift coffin for months became the face of deceit and the ultimate betrayal. Ethan's defense, a concocted story about a deranged father who'd faked his own death, crumbled under the weight of evidence. He was sentenced to life in prison, a grim fate for a man who'd traded his humanity for fleeting wealth. The stolen property and money were returned to his father. He amended his will with a new heir, Ethan's niece, who'd flown in from across the country for the trial. As for the old man, his survival defied all odds. The weeks of neglect and captivity had taken their toll, leaving him a frail shell of his former self. But the spark of life, the flicker of hope I'd seen in his eyes that night, hadn't been extinguished. He moved to a small coastal town, far from the shadows of the warehouse and the betrayal of his son. He hired a caretaker, a kind woman named Maggie, who helped him navigate his fragile new beginning. The ordeal had scarred me, but it had also shown me the strength of the human spirit and the resilience of hope even in the darkest of times. It was a reminder that sometimes, even the most chilling Craigslist ad can lead to an unexpected encounter, one that leaves a dark mark on your soul. My trusty phone, the one that had seen countless late-night study sessions and questionable decisions, was finally on its last legs. The screen flickered like a dying firefly, and the once responsive touch was now a sluggish, unresponsive mess. Desperation clawed at me. Finals were looming and a working phone was a lifeline to the world. Scouring Craigslist, I stumbled upon a glimmer of hope. An iPhone 13 Pro Max, practically brand new, for a price so unbelievably low it felt like a scam. The seller, a man named John, assured me the phone was pristine. The only catch, he was staying at a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. Not ideal, but beggars can't be choosers. The motel loomed like a skeletal silhouette against the fading light. I parked my car, the silence broken only by the cricket's incessant chirping. John's room number was scrawled on a ripped piece of paper in my fist. As I approached, a shiver danced down my spine. The single bare bulb outside cast long distorted shadows on the peeling paint. A gruff voice interrupted my unease. "You must be here for the phone?" A man stood in the doorway, shrouded in shadow. He was tall and broad, his face obscured by the dim light. "John?" I squeaked, my voice barely a whisper. He grunted in response, ushering me inside. The room reeked of stale cigarettes and something deeper, something I had never smelled before. I forced a smile, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling. John tossed the phone on the bedspread. It gleamed under the flickering bedside lamp, pristine as promised. I picked it up, running my fingers over the smooth surface. It booted up flawlessly, the screen a vibrant oasis against the darkness of the room. Relief washed over me, momentarily erasing the creeping sense of dread. "This is perfect," I said, a little too loudly in the oppressive silence. "Glad you like it," John growled, his voice like gravel scraping against concrete. He hovered behind me, his presence suffocating. As I took the money out of my pocket to hand it over, a sudden movement caught my eye. Something fell from John's pocket. A length of rope. My breath hitched in my throat. My phone slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. Before I could react, John lunged forward. He clamped one meaty hand over my mouth, stifling my scream. The other hand, the one with the rope, snaked around my neck. It was like a vice tightening with terrifying efficiency. Panic coiled in my gut, turning into pure terror. My vision swam. Spots danced before my eyes, the air turning thick and heavy. Gasping for breath, I clawed at his hand, my fingers scrabbling uselessly against his iron grip. The taste of blood filled my mouth, a metallic tang from a bite on my tongue. Suddenly, a sound pierced the suffocating silence. A loud rhythmic banging from outside the room. John flinched, his grip momentarily loosening. I saw my chance. With a surge of adrenaline, I kicked back with all my might, catching him in the shin. He roared in pain, stumbling back. I scrambled away, running towards the cracked window. John lunged again, but I was faster this time. I crashed through the glass, the shards tearing at my skin, and tumbled onto the parking lot below. The cold night air bit at my wounds, but it was sweet liberation. John bellowed in fury, his face contorted in rage. He threw open the window, the rope still in his hands. "Come back, we are only getting started," he screamed, his voice echoing in the dead of night. Scrambling to my feet, the adrenaline fueling my escape, I started to run but almost knocked someone over. A man in a security uniform. He was the source of the persistent banging, investigating the source of the commotion. John caught up, his face a mask of fury. He raised a bat, aiming for my head. Time seemed to slow down, the scene unfolding in agonizing detail. Suddenly, the security guard tackled John. They grappled on the ground, a tangled mess of limbs and curses. I stumbled back, gasping for breath, leaning against a dented garbage bin. The fight was brutal. John, fueled by fury, rained blows on the guard, but the guard had the advantage of surprise. They wrestled, the clatter of the bat a constant threat. Just as it seemed John might overpower the guard, a siren wailed in the distance. The wail grew louder, drawing closer, its piercing cry shredding the night. John's face contorted. He knew the jig was up. With a final, desperate shove, he threw the guard off and bolted towards his motel room. The security guard scrambled back to his feet. He glanced at me, his face etched with concern, then sprinted after John. Stumbling back from the wall, I watched in a daze as they disappeared into the darkness. The whine of approaching sirens filled the air, growing louder by the second. Collapsing onto the cold ground, I hugged my knees to my chest, waves of nausea washing over me. Within minutes, the parking lot was flooded with flashing lights. Police officers swarmed the area, their voices cutting through the lingering tension. An officer knelt beside me, his gaze kind but firm. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. I choked back a sob, tears blurring my vision. He tried to kill me." The words came out in ragged gasps. The officer nodded, his jaw clenched. "Don't worry, we've got him. He's cornered himself in his room." As the officer helped me to my feet, the sounds of struggle erupted from the motel room. Shouts, a loud bang, and then a sickening silence. Moments later, police officers emerged from the room, dragging a handcuffed John between them. His face, once contorted in rage, was now a pale mask of defeat. His eyes met mine for a fleeting moment, a glimmer of cold hatred flickering within. The news painted a disturbing picture. It turned out John was no mere opportunist. He had a long, chilling history. He'd been targeting people through Craigslist ads across the country, luring them to cheap motels with promises of electronics. The authorities suspected countless victims, their bodies disposed of in nearby bins, a horrifying trail of John's nomadic murders. The investigation revealed a pattern. John would choose desolate motels, staying only a few days before moving on once his dark deed was done. His victims, mostly young and tech-hungry, were easy marks, unsuspecting of the predator lurking behind a glowing laptop screen. John eventually confessed to the murders. He recounted a string of murders, his voice devoid of remorse. He was a monster, fueled by a twisted thrill. Unfortunately for him, justice brought his killing spree to an end. However, justice couldn't erase the scars, both physical and mental. The nightmares, the constant sense of unease. Reminders of the night that almost took my life. It was a long road to healing, a journey colored by the knowledge of how close I came to becoming another nameless victim, another body discarded in the shadows. Though Craigslist will forever hold a chilling memory for me, I cling to the knowledge that the world isn't just a breeding ground for monsters. It's also a place where ordinary people, like the security guard, can become unexpected heroes. And that, in the end, is a story worth remembering.